So welcome to this latest video on 162 Maths, and in this video we'll be going over some GCSE Maths past exam questions related to using the quadratic formula. Now, as always, I'll include a copy of the questions that we go through in this video as a link in the description, along with a lesson link that goes over this topic in greater detail. Now, before we get started working through some questions, let's just have a quick overview over what it is you need to revise when studying quadratic formula questions. The first thing is that when solving any quadratic equation, you need to make sure it's equal to 0, and using the quadratic formula is no exception. So always make sure it's equal to 0. Most cases it usually is given to you where it's equal to 0, but other questions may involve some rearranging, so always look out to make sure that you are checking that it's equal to 0 first. You also need to know what the a, b and c values actually are. Now, a is the coefficient of x squared, so it's always the number that's in front of the x squared. Now, typically a could be 1, it could be 3, it could be 6, it could be absolutely any number, but there'll definitely be an a value. For b is the coefficient of x, so that's the number in front of x. Now again, b, if there is no number, it's going to equal 1. And also look out for negative numbers of b. B, when negative, can cause a bit of trouble simply because in the quadratic formula, as you can see, it starts off with minus b. So if b is negative, then it's going to start off with the positive value at the front of that quadratic formula. With c is the constant at the end, so that's the number being left at the end. Now, you may not have a c, it may equal 0, but again, be mindful when it's c is negative. And again, but the biggest problem is when b is negative, I would say. So always practice those types of questions. Now, if you are going to substitute numbers into the quadratic formula and b is negative, then I strongly recommend you put any negative numbers in brackets. So again, let me just write this here. So put negative values in brackets. And again, it's always good practice for you to do that anyway, but personally speaking, I would always simplify the expressions first. When I've substituted it into a quadratic formula, as I'll show in the examples that we go through, before using the calculator. Now again, the formula is given to you in the exam paper, but it's not going to be given next to the question. It will usually be given on the insert or the inside cover of your exam paper, but it is given to you, so you don't need to remember it. Personally, with enough practice that you do in classes and for revision, it'll be a formula that looks more complicated, but you will actually learn to remember it. You also need to show in your working correct substitution. So it's really important that even though this is going to be a calculator question, don't just simply, once you've figured out your A, B, C values, go straight into using the calculator. Always write down the correct substitution, because that in itself will give you marks. Always simplify where possible. Don't just simply, once you've substituted values in and you've written it down, don't go straight for your calculator, particularly when A, B and C are negative. Calculators don't like dealing with negative numbers. So again, as long as you're remembering to put your negative numbers in brackets, again, that's effective use of your calculator. However, what makes more sense is simplifying it to numbers first and then reaching for your calculator to solve. Again, it's really underrated that you really do need to practice these questions. Yes, it seems very simple. Yes, it's a case of just simply replacing letters with numbers, but you can't devalue the practice needed for these questions. These questions are usually worth between 2 and 4 marks. So again, you really don't want to be making a mistake. And because a lot of the work is on the calculator, you won't know what is a correct answer, what's an incorrect answer until you get it marked. So it's really important you do practice the questions and check to see if you're getting it correct. The next thing is check the question for rounding requirements. More and more questions are asking you to round your answers to a mixture of decimal places, significant figures. So again, make sure that your rounding technique is on point. Also, if there's no solution, don't think you've gone wrong. That is a possible answer. But basically, no solutions mean the parabola does not cross the x-axis. So sometimes a question might ask you, is there any solutions to this particular equation when it's equal to 0? If your calculator gives you a math error or gives you no solutions, then that basically means that the parabola does not cross the x-axis, so therefore there aren't any solutions. Now again, just before we get started working through these questions, a little reminder, if you want access to this question paper, then all you need to do is just simply click on the link in the description, and I'll also include a lesson that goes over how to do the quadratic formula and how to solve quadratic equations using the formula in greater detail as a link in the description. So looking at question 1, it says solve the equation x squared plus 2x minus 9 equals 0. Give your answer to 2 sig fig. Now again, first always check to make sure it's equal to 0, which it is. So then I can then go straight into substituting what my a, b values are. So a is going to be 1, b is positive 2, and c is negative 9. So in substituting numbers, x equals, and it's going to be minus 2 plus minus 2 squared minus 4 times a times c. I always like to put brackets around the 4ac, and that's all divided by 2 times 1. Now, again, at this stage, I could substitute it straight into my calculator, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make it a little bit easier and just use my mathematical knowledge to just simplify some of these. So 2 squared is 4, 4 times 1 is 4, times negative 9 is minus 36, all divided by 2. Now, 2 negatives make a positive, so that's going to be minus 2 plus minus 4 plus 36, which is 40, divided by 2. Now if I enter this in the calculator, remember one answer is when you're using a positive, the other answer is when you're using a negative, and to 2 decimal places you should have an answer of 2.2 and minus 4.2. Moving on to question 2, it says solve the equation x squared minus 7 equals 0. Give your answer to 1 decimal place. Now it's only worth 2 marks. Now again, for this you could use a quadratic formula in which your a, b, c values are what's on the screen. But as you can see here, what I could also do is just solve it algebraically without using the formula. So here I've got x squared equals 7. So x equals plus minus the square root of 7. Now if I type in that into my calculator, I'm going to get an answer of 2.6 to 1 decimal place and minus 2.6 in for the other question. Again, just to make sure that I'll go back on question 1. It does say 2 sig fig. I don't know if I said decimal place, which I did, but those answers are to 2 significant figures. Going back to question 3, it says solve 5x squared plus x minus 10 equals 0. Give your answer 2 decimal places. So again, making sure it's equal to 0, which this is. So a equals 5, b equals 1, and c equals minus 10. So substituting numbers in, I get minus 1 plus minus 1 squared minus 4 times 5 times minus 10, all divided by 2 times 5. So that becomes minus 1 plus minus 1 squared, which is 1, 4 times 5, which is 20, times minus 10 is minus 200. So that becomes minus 200, all over 10. So that becomes minus 1 plus minus root 201 divided by 10. And if I type that into my calculator, round the numbers up to 2 decimal places, I should have an answer of 1.32 and minus 1.52. And you can write those numbers in any order. Don't think that you need to write your smallest number first. Moving on to question 4, it says solve 3x squared minus 2x minus 6 equals 0. Give your answer in the form of a surd. So this question could be on a non-calculator paper, but again, making sure it's equal to 0. So here I've got a equals 3, b equals minus 2, and c equals minus 6. So lots of negatives there. So substitute it into the quadratic formula, end up with minus 2 plus minus 2 squared minus 4 times 3 times minus 6. It's all square rooted, all divided by 2 times 3. And then if I simplify this without using a calculator first, well, here I've got minus 2 becomes positive 2, plus minus 2 squared is positive 4, and then 4 times 3 times minus 6 is minus 72, and that's all divided by 6. So then what I end up with is 2 plus minus root 76 over 6. Now I can simplify 76 as root 4 times root 19. So therefore that can be written as 2 root 19. So then swapping this with 2 root 19, I get 2 plus or minus 2 root 19 over 6. And then I can simplify by dividing by 2. So that becomes a 3, that becomes a 1, that becomes a 1. So I get 1 plus minus root 19 over 3, which, going back, is the exact way they wanted me to write my answer. Then moving on to question 5, it says solve 4x squared equals 8x plus 2. Give your answer 2 decimal places. It must show you're working out. So again here I need to make this equal to 0 first. So that's 4x squared minus 8x minus 2 equals 0. So then a equals 4, b equals minus 8, and c equals minus 2. So x equals minus 8 plus minus, and it's going to be minus 8 squared minus 4 times minus 2, all divided by 2 times 4. So then simplifying this, I get x equals positive 8 plus minus 64 minus 4 times 4 is 16 times minus 2 is minus 32, all divided by 8. So then that becomes 8 plus minus, then 64 plus 32 is 96, divided by 8. And then if I then type that into my calculator to 2 decimal places, I get an answer of 2.22 and minus 0.22. And again, you can write those numbers in any order. Moving on to question 6a, it says that Joe wants to work out the solutions of x squared minus 2x plus 2x minus 7 equals 0. She says that solutions cannot be worked out because x squared plus 2x minus 7 does not factorize to x plus a, x plus b, where a and b are integers. Is Joe correct? Well, she's correct in the fact that it doesn't factorize, but she's not correct in the fact that it can't be, there's no solutions. So what you need to write here is the fact that she could use the quadratic formula. You could say she could use CTS, so completing the square. She could also use, she could plot the equation and solve, but basically, is she correct? The answer is going to be no. Then it then says for question 6b, without expanding the bracket, show how to work out the exact values of 4 and then x plus 1 all squared equals 16. So for this, what you want to do first is take the 16 over to the other side. So we end up with 16 over 4, which equals 4. So x plus 1 squared equals 4. We could then square root, so x plus 1 equals plus minus the square root of 4. So x plus 1 equals plus or minus 2. So x equals plus or minus 2 minus 1. So when x is minus 2, it's going to equal minus 3. And when x is positive 2, it's going to equal 1. So the answers then are x equals 3 or x equals 1. Then moving on to question 7. It says here we've got to solve 6 over 3x plus 2 equals 3x over x squared plus 1. Give your solutions to 3 sig fig, and it's worth 5 marks. So because we've got a fraction equals a fraction, I can cross multiply. So what I've got is I've got 6 lots of x squared plus 1 equals 3x plus 2. Again, all I've done there is cross multiplied. So then expanding the brackets, I get 6x squared plus 6 equals 9x squared plus 6x. If I take all of this over to the side to make it equal to 0, I end up with 3x squared plus 6x minus 6 equals 0. I can then at this stage divide everything by 3, so I'm dealing with smaller numbers. And then from this, I can then go on to use the quadratic formula. So a equals 1, b equals 2, and c equals minus 2. So x equals it's going to equal minus 2 plus minus, and then it's going to be 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times minus 2, all divided by 2 times 1, which equals minus 2 plus minus 4. 4 times 1 is 4 times minus 2 is minus 8, so it's minus 8, all divided by 2. So then that then becomes x equals -2 plus minus root 12 over 2. From this, I can then enter that into my calculator, and I should end up with answers of 0.732 and minus 2.73. Now note how both those numbers have been rounded up to 3 significant figures. Remember, 0 doesn't count as a significant figure at the start. Then moving on to our last question, it says solve the equation of 5 over 2x plus 2 plus 2 over 4x minus 1 equals 9. Give your answer to 2 decimal places. So first things first, what we need to do is have a common denominator. So we multiply this first fraction by this denominator and the second fraction by that denominator. So what I end up with is 5 lots of 4x minus 1. And the common denominator is going to be x plus 2 4x minus 1 plus 2 lots of x plus 2 over 4x minus 1 x plus 2 in that equals 9. Then what I can do, as I've got a common denominator, I can write it all as 1. So 4x minus 1 plus 2 lots of 2x plus 2 all over 4x minus 1 x plus 2 equals 9. I can then take this denominator over to the side, so I end up with 20x minus 5 plus 2x plus 4 equals 9 lots of 4x minus 1 x plus 2. Simplifying the left hand side, I get 22x minus 1 equals, and it's going to be 9 lots of, now again I'm going to take a shortcut and expanding those brackets out. So I get 4x squared plus 7x minus 2, which then becomes 22x minus 1 equals 36x squared plus 63x minus 18. Then if I take all of this over to the other side, I end up with 36x squared plus 41x minus 17 equals 0. So here a equals 36, b equals 41, and c equals minus 17. So from this, what I then want to do is substitute those into the quadratic formula. So x equals minus 41 plus minus 41 squared minus 4 times 36 times minus 17, all divided by 2 times 36. Now again, if you've done this correctly, you should have an answer of 0.32 and minus 1.46, and those answers have been rounded to 2 decimal places.